as you may have seen, Anthony Albanese has claimed in interviews that he's done all he can to battle this horror rise in anti-Semitism. And it's a statement that should make every one of us angry because it's a shocking dereliction of duty. He's never taken racism against Jews seriously enough. And just days into 2025, this is only getting worse. We've seen swastikas spray painted across the front of synagogues, one in southern Sydney, an attempted arson attack at Newtown synagogue, and recently we saw anti-Semitic garbage graffitied on cars in Sydney's east. And there's so much that's happened over the past few weeks, 4 weeks that we've been off air. It's more than I can even cover now. And isn't that devastating to say? Albanese's leadership on this has been inadequate, to say the least. While I despair, Julian Lisa says this is time for a national cabinet on the anti-Semitism crisis. He's absolutely right, and he's on set with me right now. Julian, great to see you again.
Thanks, Sharri. Good to be with you.
So before I want to hear more about your idea, I actually just want to show you Anthony Albanese's response to your suggestion. Have a look at this.
I've seen some of those comments from Mr. Lisa. I make this point that state and territory governments, again, we have a federation in Australia. State and territory governments are responsible primarily for those issues. What we have established is Operation Avalite to make sure that the Australian Federal Police work cooperatively with state and territory governments.
Not his responsibility, Julian. It's the problem of the states.
Well, it's everyone's problem, Sharri. Anti-Semitism is a problem for everyone. And indeed, when we've seen these escalating attacks on synagogues and Jewish properties over recent days and months, I think the time for wringing our hands and apologising that anti-Semitism is a problem in Australia is over. This is a time for action. I want to see no one engage in these activities. And the best way you can do that is to provide a deterrent to ensure that if you're engaged in this activity, you will do time. You will go to jail. And I think the federal government does have a responsibility. Firstly, they have a responsibility to convene the National Cabinet. Secondly, there are offences through using a carriage service, a mobile phone, using apps to plan and organise these attacks. I think if anybody is engaged in any of these things, we should be using every power at our disposal, federal, state and territory, to ensure that these attacks don't happen. And I was delighted to see the Premier of Queensland say that if the Prime Minister convened National Cabinet to look at these issues, he would be there in a heartbeat. If you graffiti a Jewish property, a synagogue or communal centre, you should do time. Because this isn't paint on a building as the Greens would like you to think. This is about saying to your fellow Australians, you're not welcome in this country and you should be scared. And we've had enough of this over the last 14, 15 months. If you'd asked me 15 months ago if we'd still be talking about anti-Semitism now, I would have said, no, there's no way. But this has got worse, not better, Sharri, and that's why it's time to set a standard that if you attack Jewish property in this fashion, you will do time.
And that's the issue, that we are seeing incidents almost every day now. This year it has been basically every single day, and it's very rare that you hear about someone being caught or someone going to prison. There do seem to be no consequences. I mean, Albanese today, he claimed that Peter Dutton is creating fear. Albanese's creating fear because he's let this hatred emerge. He didn't deal with it quickly enough. And he's still not dealing with it properly. Look, you've today made headlines in The Australian because you're also criticising Penny Wong for basically trading away Western values. What's your criticism of her on this point?
Look, I think Australia has a proud tradition as a Western democracy, a liberal democracy. We stand with other like-minded democracies. And I think Penny Wong, as the Foreign Minister, both on Israel and on Ukraine particularly, has not done enough and in fact has been selling out our values and selling out our traditions. On Israel, you'll remember, even as people were searching for bodies on the 7th of October, even as people were unaccounted for, she was telling Israel to exercise restraint. Even before the 7th of October, she had that ham-fisted change at the capital of Israel without consulting the Israelis, without consulting people who are interested in those issues here in Australia. She gave funding to UNRWA, which subsequently, as we know, was involved in the October 7 terrorist attacks, both as providing a headquarters for Hamas communication operations and also with its own employees engaged in October 7's attacks. And then she's consistently voted against Israel at the United Nations and called for things like ceasefires, which would have seen the Hamas leadership and Hezbollah leadership there. She's treated the Israeli ambassador worse than she treated the ambassador of China, despite the fact that there were occasions where Chinese troops fired flares at Australians and those sonar...
Literal military attacks against Australia.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And they think they can fix it all by sending Mark Dreyfus to Israel.
Well, this is just a gimmick, just before the election, because I think the government realises that fair-minded people don't want to see what Australia has done to Israel happen to Israel, because they see Israel as a country like Australia, a liberal democratic country that stands for human rights. And it's extraordinary to see this. And Mark Dreyfus is completely the wrong person to send there. He's just another...
The only reason they're sending him is because he's Jewish. You're Jewish, I'm Jewish. We've actually been extremely strong on pushing back against this anti-Semitism. Where's he been on this?
Well, that's right. And I think the fact that he's gone along with all the anti-Israel positions of the government is deeply felt in the community. Not only that, he is the person, more than any other cabinet minister, who has the machinery of government to deal with social cohesion and anti-Semitism.
Exactly.
The Human Rights Commission, the federal police.
And he voted against your idea for a judicial inquiry.
He did, repeatedly. Yeah. And so, when the government says that they have done everything they can, it's just a lie. It's 100%. Just like the lie they told the Jewish community before the last election, that there'd be no difference in the policy in relation to the Jewish community and Israel between the Coalition and Labor. No greater lie has ever been told in Australian politics, Sharri.
Julie and Lisa, thank you so much for your strong commentary and your continued push for action on this. We so need your strength and we're grateful for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharri.